David Freudberg, host of Humankind. Listeners know that we explore many realms of the human journey, and some of our podcasts, including some of my favorites, delve into wisdom traditions, sometimes ancient writings or teachings that arise from a variety of backgrounds, sources that help us to focus on truths that really matter. And a lot of this boils down to connecting to something bigger than ourselves, to see that we're all part of some mysterious river of meaning, that the whole is truly greater than the sum of its parts. When I can get calm and touch that inner place of quietude, it points me homeward. Thank you. Support for Humankind comes from the Humankind Program Fund. Our series is produced in association with WGBH Boston and the Network Incorporated.
We only need to pick up our newspapers and read the worst wars in the world are religious wars. And I think we have to be always asking ourselves, is religion here nourishing the spirit of life, or has it gotten off that track?
The path of people who regard themselves as spiritually inclined but who do not affiliate with organized religion. You're listening to Humankind. I'm David Freudberg. America's freedom of religion assures that a rich variety of religious and non-religious experiences will flourish, as they have since the country was founded by wig-wearing idealists in the 1700s. And this mixture of approaches has long fascinated Bradley University religion professor Robert Fuller, who studies people's motivations for choosing different paths.
There was a psychologist in the mid-20th century at Harvard. His name was Gordon Allport, and he was very interested in personality theory, and he was absolutely shocked one day to realize that people who attend religious organizations were more likely to have racial prejudice than those who don't. And he, as a believer and as a church member, was almost horrified by this. And so he began with this set of questions. Who are these individuals? And he made a distinction that he was able to ask some questions to differentiate what he called extrinsic belonging and intrinsic belonging. Extrinsic was, I like to be seen here. I want my neighbors to know that I belong. It's important for me perhaps for business relationship or social standing, but there wasn't much of an interconnection with either the doctrines or the experiences, the rituals that drove them. And he differentiated that from intrinsic. People looking for an outlook on life, a way to organize their priorities for not just short-term interests, but longer-term objectives of their significance of why they're here on earth. And by the way, he found that people who scored high on the intrinsic religion had very little racial prejudice, but the extrinsic did.
Professor Fuller, based in Peoria, Illinois, is the author of Spiritual But Not Religious. He has spent decades analyzing the spectrum of belief, from people who choose to belong to traditional religion, to those who view life as a spiritual journey outside of religion, to people who choose not to believe at all. A trend he's noticed is that some people who describe themselves as belonging to religion may not hold deep religious convictions. More than a belief, it's the group they identify with.
In any culture, not just the United States, we need to bind together. We need at times to sacrifice our immediate personal interests for the good of the group. And belonging to the religious organization signals your willingness to do that. It signals your sense of the good of the group. And I think for many people, it's a form of loyalty. This might, for example, explain why you so often see American flags at churches. This kind of connection of loyalty to the group nationally and religiously. Even Billy Graham, the famed evangelist, who seemed to appeal to people from many denominations in the United States, once said, to be a good American, you must first be a good Christian. If you're a good Christian, you must then be a good American. This sense of willingness to be a good citizen, to support others. And so I think for many people it signals that, more so perhaps than any actual specific beliefs about the afterlife or gods.
According to a recent survey, nearly 5 out of 6 Americans declare a religious affiliation. The remainder identify with no tradition in particular or say they're unsure or non-believers. But for Robert Fuller, these simple labels don't always reveal the full picture.
Well, every group needs ways of distinguishing who's a member and who's not a member. Now, in human culture, as opposed to other species on planet Earth, which also have their ways of signaling who's in the group and who's not, out group, in group, territorialism, adherence to religious belief is one of our quickest ways of signaling to other human beings whether we're in their group or not. It can certainly distinguish whether you're Shiite or Sunni Muslim. It can distinguish whether you're Irish Catholic or Irish Protestant.
But you're saying that in some cases it's not actual adherence to a belief.
I think I think that you signal the adherence to the belief at an outer behavioral level. It may not translate also to personally having deep commitment. There's many people who are attending churches for whom their religious beliefs don't really dictate. I mean, you can become, for example, born again, and within a few weeks, it really hasn't made much change in how you spend your money, how you devote your time, either to family or to recreation, etc. So not always, of course, does a religious belief translate into any meaningful action.
Let's shift now to Americans today who regard themselves as having a spiritual higher power, but who choose not to participate in organized religion. How many people are in this category, and why are they spiritual but not religious?
Okay. Well, we have different statistics to tell us this. I'm sticking with a figure that's a little higher than some recent studies have shown. I'm showing that about 40% of Americans have no meaningful relationship with a religious organization.
This group, he says, ranges from atheists to people of sincere faith who don't join organized religion. Robert Fuller acknowledges that in matters of private belief, the lines of demarcation can be fuzzy. A large sector of Americans hold profound spiritual convictions, but he does not count as serious believers those who appear to be just going through the motions, people showing up at services a couple of times a year for major holidays, but who are not otherwise engaged. In a sense, he focuses on the opposite group, people who choose not to attend religious services, but who deeply contemplate matters of life and death, connection, and meaning.
These individuals are just as curious, maybe even more curious about these questions. In fact, within that, now I'm going to say about 1 in 5 Americans fits my definition of being very spiritually interested, but not affiliated with a religious organization.
And when you say they may actually be more curious than some people who are seriously affiliated with a religion, is that because they don't have the pat answers that can sometimes be fed by religions, and therefore it's a more engaged kind of exploration?
Absolutely. And maybe now, by the way, let's just take one brief second here. The words religion and spiritual are really interchangeable terms, and I could easily say that's a very religious person, very spiritual. And I think for most of history, they have been very interchangeable. We have come recently, most persons listening today are thinking, I think of now of spirituality as a little bit more private, individual. Religion is a little more public in a congregation setting. Spirituality has a little bit more flexibility with what I believe. Religion has more fixed, and this becomes the key concept.